no block, him swinging away, and it's a real rich chapter of my life. And Rick Olmsted, speaking of Rich, is here. Has got something to impart to us all, and he's got to take off. So let him be the first speaker, and then it'll just be kind of casual. We'll have Roger Battistone can come up and talk, and then Rich Rafaro, and everybody can just come up and make their comments that they remember to be important about a pretty remarkable man, Henry Bergman. So Rick Olmsted.
It's just kind of amazing to see John Lee, who's been in the classroom 30 years, and he can't quiet anybody down. Sorry, I saw you there right now. I first met Henry in 1966. Rich and Smuzz asked me to come down to East Beach at the old courts, and I saw this guy, and the only word I can think of when I think of Hank is dynamic. Dynamic. He was, and as Rich so eloquently put in one of the papers, he would play with anybody. He would play with the best, and he would play with the hacks. I'd be the hack. He would play with me all the time. He just played with a partner. I never saw him give a dirty look to a partner. You know, Ronnie or somebody might disagree with that, but I never saw him roll his eyes, do anything. Officials, I don't even think he thought there were officials out there. He never spoke. The guy had no ego. He had no ego. His work ethic, I'll just tell you briefly, at the old courts, we would play all day. We'd put on shoes, Wilton and Henry and I, and then we'd jog to some school up in Montecito and do jumps up there. It seemed like an hour, and he'd want to go for more. He would, to me, he was a spectacular athlete. You talk about everybody, I'm around the AVP right now, and they say, well, this guy couldn't have played in this era, this guy couldn't have played in this era. You take this guy here, he could have played in any era, anybody. You put Henry on any era, any court, no antennas or whatever, and he would have been just fine. He had what I thought was the ooh factor. Let me explain that. I've never experienced this since the 60s, and doing it now, going around a court, and if Hank got served or he got a transition ball, there would be an ooh go around through the crowd, disseminated through the crowd, because they knew something explosive and dynamic was going to happen. They were certain of that, and he always came through with that. That shot away from the body was anatomically the most incorrect thing you could ever have, but it was so explosive, I don't know how the guy survived. If I could take just a minute, one of his best friends that he grew up with was not able to be here today. Mike Wilton is in San Diego, was not able to be here, and as you know, they spent a lot of time together. Mike hasn't lived here for a long time, but every time he came back to Santa Barbara, he made it a point of seeing Hank, stopping by and seeing Henry. So this is what is just very briefly what Mike asked me to read. My friend, Henry Bergman. It is hard to know exactly what demons Henry battled the last 35 years. Speculation may abound why he chose to apart from long friends, his beach volleyball lifestyle, and competitive successes. I do know that he had a pure love for the game, and yet was quite uncomfortable with the celebrity role that was thrust upon him. Fame and attention, never his motivation. Clearly though, whatever the circumstances were for his withdrawal, they were compelling to him. In his reclusive state, he was always reservedly friendly, though not inclined to very long visits. This was including my last visit with Henry in June of 2008. What I always remember about Henry, he was a person I respected from clear back to our Garfield school days. I'll never forget Henry and friends showing up at Henry's Beach, aka the Pit, and standing up while riding waves on canvas surf mats while we thought we were cool, riding on our knees. From that day forward, everyone at the Pit forsook knee riding and began trying to stand up. He invited me to East Beach to learn volleyball after I tore my ankle ligaments playing basketball at Santa Barbara City College. As a side note, and he wanted me to make sure, I'm grateful to Bob Van Wagner for helping me learn how to play. He taught me He taught me to properly train and included me in his off-the-court training sessions that were very specific to volleyball. He taught me about fitness and diet for an athlete. I'll always remember his gracious, friendly, and caring ways, how he would go out of his way to make people feel at ease. I never saw him do anything mean. He had no guile and certainly never a hidden agenda. Long hikes and bike hikes in the mountain and bike rides in the mountains, and long and interesting conversation. Henry was a thinker about many subjects. He was a genuine friend. Coach John Wooden has said that it is entirely possible to be a warrior and a gentleman. This was Henry. He taught us all how to behave when competing. He taught us how we ought to treat each other. He was and remains a good and gentle person. He is one of the good guys. I wish for him peace and joy in the eternities. This is from Mike Wilton. Thank you.
All right, I'll do that. Okay, right over here we have a bunch of guys from the class of '62 with Henry here. And class of '61 too, we've got Bill Corliss and John Nadell. Both those guys hung out with Henry during the earlier years before he really got into the volleyball thing. But when we used to go down the beach all the time, Henry would go, every time he wanted to go down the beach, I mean, by himself or with somebody else, but other times we'd go to the YMCA at night and play basketball, because Henry was the starting forward for the Santa Barbara basketball team, and he played with some of these guys here tonight, and he played since he was a sophomore, and but he was a fantastic person. I mean, it's just too bad during the last 10 or 15 years that he became sort of a recluse. Henry and I, when the draft was coming, we were both in school, but Henry had left, and we got our notice to go down there and take our physicals. So Henry and I got on the bus, and it was all the B's there, Baston, Henry Bergman, and Henry, he put on that sheet down there every kind of illness he's ever had. I mean, he didn't want to go in the service, the poor guy. And he just wasn't made for the service. He's more of the beach person. And I said, Henry, why don't we go over there and join the Naval Reserve with these other guys, about 8 of us? And he said, no, I'm going to take my chances. So, but about two months later, we both got our draft notices and to report down to L.A. I didn't have to go because I was in the reserves, but Henry went down there, and being the big person that he was, the nice looking, and the Marines picked him right out of the line and took him to boot camp, and he just could never, he just really couldn't hack the boot camp. It wasn't his style. So after boot camp, they released him, and he came home and started back with the volleyball again. And but I just want to, all these guys here, I'm sure, have 10 stories, like John Nadell over here. He grew up with Henry over there, and the same house that his parents been living in for the last 20, 30 years. And I just happened to, I'd see Rich Rufero at the gym all the time. Matter of fact, Rich was a good basketball player too, and my brother at Santa Barbara High. But Rich and I go to the gym, and Bobby Garcia lives nearby us. And I mean, the volleyball he was a star at, but he was also a basketball star and a star with us too. So.
Get together right here, you know. He would have walked out and said, I'm leaving, you know, and this is, and during his life it was the same way as that notoriety thing. He did not seek the spotlight, and, you know, there's an afterlife, who knows, but, you know, it'd be nice if he was aware at some level just of how appreciated he was. Here's a guy that appreciated him because he stuck with him in a lot of tournaments. Rich Rufero.
He definitely. I'd like to kind of brief everybody on Henry's upbringing. From what I understand.
Can you guys hear that? No. Loud. It's got to be louder.
Henry's upbringing, from what I understand, his mother and father escaped Germany, came to Santa Barbara. His father was a gardener and a chauffeur, and his mother Frida was a maid for this wealthy lady in Montecito. And when the lady died, she left them the house on State Street, free and clear, and a green Cadillac. So anyway, which Henry drove once. But that kind of gives you an insight. They had him late in life, and you know, Henry started out kind of different than all of us. So I'm going to flash back to the early 60s at East Beach, where I had to go through all the bullshit that Henry went through, and there were only 2 courts. Nobody would play with you. In those days, they had the UCSB guys, which was up in the hill. They had actually Jim O'Hara, Mike O'Hara's brother, played down there. Johnny Osborne, who's a legend, Ernie Zampese. So I bided my time like Henry, out on the outer court. Nobody would play. Sometimes there'd be 14 people on the side. Finally got to the A court, and I look around, and Henry Bergman starts to show up. And he showed up with a high school friend, I don't think he's here, Kit Myers. I don't know if you remember him. His mother ran the East Beach Grill, made hamburgers, and Henry just sat there for a whole summer with Kit, and the big boys at 3 o'clock would sit down and have beer and crab claws and bullshit and play cards. And that was the time for anybody that didn't know how to play to go out there and try and play. Well, I was just a weekend player because I worked all week, and Henry sat down there, and obviously he became what he is today, or what he was today. And secondly, I'd like to talk about the move from where the courts were to where they are today. The city gave us a choice, either West Beach, where there are some courts now, or East Beach. So we bargained with them. We said, we'll move down to where it is today if you put in toilets. There's no toilets there today. This was 30 years ago. So they got even. In the beginning, when I started playing with Henry, as most of you know, he never said anything. And I'd start playing with him, and I'd say, you know, if a ball was close to the line, I'd look at him, and he'd look at me. And I'd say, well, Henry, can you tell me in or out? He'd just look at me. So we didn't do well for a while. We had no communication. Henry always drove home every night from any tournament, whether it was Corona Del Mar, Laguna, slept in his own bed, and drove back down. Well, I had a semi-successful career with him. I thought third and fourth, fifth, to me, was like winning. You know, that was huge, but it wasn't good enough for Henry, so I'll recall the issue that brought it up. We're in Corona. Henry drove all the way home, came back. Bobby Garcia and I are in the restroom, and I'm throwing up because I had a rough night. And Henry, being Henry, comes over to me, and he says, Rich, I apologize, but I can't play with you anymore. You just don't train like I do. And why he dumped me for Rundle, I'll never know. But anyway, I'd like to touch upon a thing that really hasn't been brought out, was his six-man ability indoors. And in those days, you had maybe, 4 or 5 opens, Ron, I don't remember. And then all of us would go indoors and play on these six-man teams. And Henry, I mean, he was unbelievable because we'd have to play in these round robins. And you'd play 5 or 6 matches, and at 5 o'clock, who cared, right? Henry would go out there and start blistering balls. I mean, at 5 o'clock, after playing all day, just hitting the snot out of the balls, and of course we just kind of do this. And then we go get our beer and go home. But the highlight of this whole thing is the national team. In the late 60s, Japan, the Japanese had won the Olympics, I think, and they won it by diving on the floor. So half the people in this room, Lang, Butch, and Keel, and all these people were at this tryout, as was Henry and Rundle, and the coaches were Harlan Cohen and Val Keller. And so they were trying to teach us how to dive, forward. And so we had these Tom Ryan, these big guys who fall on the floor. Well, to shorten the story, somebody threw a ball for Henry, and he dove and he hit his chin. That was the last time he went forward. So the coach, to make an example out of him, brought him out, and he said, Henry, you got to learn to dive, because what if I throw a ball over here? He got it, without diving. And he heaved it over here, Henry got it. And he put one about 20 feet in front of him, and Henry says, that's not mine. True story. True story. And he made that team, ended up in, I think they went to Brazil and got sick from the food. Because Henry always ate these bloodwurst sandwiches at East Beach. Frida would make him these things, we'd be into our crab claws, and he'd pull out this wax paper bag full of blood. It was a blood sausage, and that's what he ate. So anyway, that's enough from me. I'd like to give you over to Larry Rundle, whom he dumped me for, and I have no idea why.
Rags, you're beautiful.
First of all, we've already honored Jack. Jack Sears used to play at the Old Beach, okay? And the second thing I'd like to honor is Bob Van Wagner, for without him, we wouldn't have any of these pictures from those days.
I tried to get Mike Bright up here. And most of you all remember Mike. And
How
he
is Mike?
Mike is even more curmudgeon-y than he ever was. But so I emailed him and invited him down, and he said that his legs are so bad that he really can't get around anymore, and he was sorry. And so I emailed him back and told him that I was going to be speaking, and that I would say some nice things about him, and about how he always admired me as a player and looked up to me, and admired my blocking. Now, you have to know, Mike considered me the worst blocker that he ever played with. He one time said it after one ball ricocheted off my hands and out of bounds. We came down, and he looked at me and he says, "You are the worst blocker I have ever played with!" And I went, "Oh God, the worst?" And we rotated twice, and then the third time, and now I'm back left, and Mike's right next to me. And I said, "The worst?" And he goes, "Yes, the worst!" So he wouldn't come. So at any rate, he then said, so I told him that I would say nice things about him, and that how much he admired my blocking, and he emailed me back, and he says, "You know, I have to reply to your blocking prowess." He says, "It has been said that goldfish," this is a quote from Mike, "It has been said that goldfish are so simple that each lap around the bowl is a whole new experience. Volleyball friends are that same way. Every time I see one, they tell me the same damn story, only slightly embellished. So as time goes by, the stories pretty much differ from the original, thus you being a great blocker. Keep swimming your laps, Rags. Maybe they will forget." As I was looking at some of the pictures of the that showed up in the newspaper, one of the ones was of Henry hitting, and he was hitting at just, you know, his cross-court angle. And in the background, you can see the parking right along the East Beach there, and it's all VW vans, just like about 6 of the old VW vans. And I couldn't help thinking that I just happened to see on the news that a Volkswagen, a 1970, I believe, Volkswagen van that was stolen before it was delivered recently. It was stolen in 1970, and it showed up in a storage container down in some Dallas, or not in Dallas, down in the docks, but it was stored all these years. And the insurance company, it was in pristine condition. The insurance company checked its records, found out, and that they had paid off that car, and they paid it $1,900 to pay off that car, and they wanted the car back, which they got. They then auctioned it off for $28,000.
Oh my God.
So
And how does that relate to Henry?
I'm about to tell you. I'm about to tell you. I'm thinking that maybe some of our memories have appreciated and valued like those old folks, like those old Volkswagens.
Way to tie it in.
The first time I met Henry was when it was a mixed ranking tournament down in at Sorrento Beach, and I was playing with the famous Ron Snyder, who was AAA at that time. And you could have in the mixed ranking tournament, you could have one AAA and one AA or single A. And Ronnie was AAA and I was single A. And our first match of the day was against Raffaello and his partner, who turned out to be Henry. And so Ronnie came up, and we warmed up, and then we obviously said, well, who do you want to serve? Well, let's serve the single A guy. So we served Henry, boom. They then served me, and I sided out. We served Henry again. Kaboom! They served me, I sided out. Went back to Ronnie, and I said, what do you think? And he says, let's serve Rafaro. They did.
Who won the tournament?
I really don't remember. It might have been. It might have been. But
Probably Pfluger and Lang. Pfluger and Lang. There you go. Is that who it was?
So according to Mike, we're all going to be embellishing our stories, and if I'm embellishing any of these stories, or we're all permitted. My great memories of Henry are the same as we all have, and we don't have to repeat them. How good he was, and playing against Von Hagen and Lang. I mean, that was the highlight. But Henry's cross-court hits, the power, his jumping, and his quiet and his modesty and his understatements. I remember one particular time when Henry had hit his cross-court angle. I mean, like, I don't know how many times, just over and over. It's just everything is cross-court. They've got a Joe DiMaggio, shift on. They go, both guys are cross-court, and Henry just keeps pounding it that way. And I kept on saying, Henry, would you just please hit the line? He says to me, I can't hit the line. I said, Henry, really, they're both over, just hit the line. I said, I'm going to set you outside. I can't hit the line. So I finally set him outside. Boom! He hits it, tries to hit the line, hits it out. He looks at me and goes, see? Sorry, Henry, hit it anywhere you want. Also, I remember one particular play down at the Manhattan Beach. I mean, his gift for modesty and his I get a kick out of it. There was one particular play that it was against Von Hagen and Lang, and it was one of the ones that our matches that went on endlessly. And Ronnie had hit one. Henry got a hand on it, and the ball goes spinning, ricocheting back to the back corner. I go running after it, and I dive backwards and just flail at a bump set back up over my head to try to get it somewhere in play. And as I turn around, I can see that it's actually going to ended up being a great set, and it just comes right down. And Henry takes that set that's coming from the service line, behind the service line, and just rifles it straight down in the crowd, just like you described. Just a great play by Henry. And I jump up and I go over to him, and he looks at me with just a complete straight face. He goes, nice set. I said, nice set? That gets a nice set? What would have been a fabulous set, Henry?
And against him lots of times, and what was really a pivotal period for me is watching those late 60s competitions between Lang and Von Hagen and Brundle and Bergman. If any of you guys were there for that era, you know that volleyball has rarely ascended to that level of attraction. No matter how much money's on it, no matter how many people have clappers in the stands, and aluminum seating and stuff, those were the things that really attracted me and really changed my life. So Ron Lang's got his perspective on a wonderful period.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about the game today is it upsets me that they don't honor the athlete. They're trying to sell beer and bathing suits and not how well the guys actually play. So that's my editorial comment. I didn't know Henry that well. I played with him 1 or 2 years inside, and I played with him against him on the beach for a few years. I'm here primarily to pay my respects to Henry because he was a great competitor. And like Larry said, he could hit the shit out of that fucking ball. He just thrilled it.
There are kids here.
Huh?
There are kids here.
This is a great education. Compared to you, we're all kids, Ronnie.
Yeah, you are. But anyhow, Henry was a great competitor. I enjoyed playing against him. I guess I played 2 tournaments with him. I only remember playing 1. But the king of statisticians, Ron Von Hagen, said I won 1 with him. I beat he and
Schwartz or something.
no, I beat Ronnie and the basketball player from UCLA.
Valley.
John Valley, which I don't remember, so. But I'm not going to argue with Ronnie because Ronnie pretty accurate on the statistics. That's really all I have to say about Henry. But I did talk to Ronnie quite a bit the last 3 or 4 days, and we would like to say one thing about somebody who didn't get any recognition upon his death. That's Gene Pfluger.
Yeah.
Here's Gene.
Everybody's got their own story about growing up and idolizing people. I used to watch Lang and Von Hagen and Pfluger at Sorrento. Boomer, maybe you did too. A lot of people grew up in that Sorrento beach and that wall and that shower, and Yoshi and Wally and all those people were pretty classic. Pfluger was one of the first people. He's got a lot to say, and when he asks a question, he's sincere, and his responses are sincere. So he just faxed me this letter yesterday and wanted it to be read, and he might have wanted Lang to read it, but as long as you guys hear, this is the voice of Ron Von Hagen. His voice really comes through in his writing. If you knew him, he wasn't a fancy wordsmith, but he was sincere beyond belief, so check it out. It's about a page and a half here. Henry Bergmann played in tournaments from 68 through 73. He won 15 tournaments and placed second 8 times. Of those 23 finals he played in, I played in 19 of them, 10 with him and 9 against him. Vince Lombardi said, "The quality of a man's life is in direct proportion to his commitment to excellence, regardless of his field of endeavor." This saying has always reminded me of Henry. He did his best to become the best he was capable of becoming, and I feel that Henry always made this effort. He was special. Henry played when there were no monetary benefits. Volleyball was his passion in life. He just loved to play volleyball. I have the same feelings about him as I do regarding Ben Hogan and Ted Williams. Like Ben Hogan, he had a silent concentration that intimidated opponents, and an ability to hit a ball so squarely and with such power, it was a rare work of art. Ted Williams' goal in life was to be the best hitter that ever lived. When Henry hit a volleyball, he was always striving for perfection. He was a great jumper, and he had a great arm swing that was equal to anyone. I think he created more excitement and anticipation when he was served than any other player. Everyone was waiting to see him hit. He totally amazed people. Henry applied the pursuit of perfection to passing and setting as well. When I played against him, I know that I couldn't miss a pass or a set because Henry wouldn't. Over the years, when it was windy or no one was at the beach, I would practice setting and hitting by myself. One day I went to East Beach to practice with Henry, and it was windy, and he was doing the same thing that I did. He had drills for himself. We spent 2 hours setting each other 8 to 10 foot back sets, and then chasing the balls that we hit. I remember how hard he could hit that 10-foot back set in the court. One of the most valuable lessons I learned from Coach Wooden was that you get in shape for a sport by practicing what you do when you play that sport, and this was Henry. Over the last couple of weeks, I've talked with Al Skates and Ron Lang and Greg and John Lee and Rudy Suara, and the common feeling that I got was that Henry Bergman could really play volleyball. Skates said that Henry was one person he always remembered, and that he was amazed at how good Henry could play. Ron Lang said that Henry could pass, set, and hit and play for a long time, and anyone who knows Ron Lang knows that that is a real compliment.
Amen.
And Al Skates has seen a few volleyball players over the years. I never really knew Henry aside from volleyball. We lived apart, and our only contact was through volleyball. He was quiet, humble, and very sincere. He was a very nice person, and he always treated me with great respect. He was just very special, both as a player and as a person. I loved playing with or against him. I consider the 1968 Manhattan Beach Open the best volleyball tournament I ever played in. I think Ron Lang, Larry Rundle, and myself are very privileged and fortunate for the time that we played with and against Henry Bergman. Ron Von Hagen. Boomer, you remember where Henry would hit the back set, that 8 or 10 foot back set? He'd hit a deep middle, and I remember standing there with Marshall Savage. It was 12-12 in Manhattan Open. I was playing with Marshall. I said, Marshall, we can do this. They called a timeout. We just gotten 2 points. I'm standing this close to Marshall in the deep middle, and Henry would just crack it. And there was no chance of digging that ball. It was coming so hard. He would just, and they ended up winning. I said, Marshall, we can win this. Marshall said, we're not going to beat we're not going to beat Bergman and Von Hagen, but we've come pretty close. Ralph, you know Marshall, you remember he had these idols, and Henry was one of the archetypal images in volleyball for me and for many others. And so after Von Hagen's observations, that's great. Anybody else that would like to come and speak? And Butch, maybe you want to say something? Anybody that would like to step forward, come on up and give your reflection on Henry. Gary.
Thank you, John. I'm here today to represent a good friend of Henry's growing up. Many of you here know Larry Vranish. He's been around a long time. Today he's down south with the Dos Pueblos women's volleyball team. They're ready to compete in the CAF championships. And Larry couldn't make it today, so he wrote something up about Henry, and he asked if I'd read it for him. So here goes. Get those glasses on just a second. It was strange what a sense of loss I felt when I heard Henry had died. I was running at Goleta Beach one day, and I saw Larry Vranish playing volleyball at Goleta Beach, as he always does. And I stopped and talked with him, and I asked him if he'd heard about Henry. And he hadn't heard about Henry, and I saw how it affected him, just what Henry meant to him, how close the relationship was. The rest of the day and many of the following days, I felt so subdued. Not even playing volleyball at Goleta Beach seemed to help much. Then I reminded myself of the obvious. Henry was my lifelong friend. From Garfield School, LaCumber Junior High, high school, athletics, and young adulthood. In grade school and junior high, we did all the normal and lame things adolescent boys do together when growing up. Happy days in the 50s. All the summer nights in my backyard, playing over the line. Every day after school, playing sports to prepare for the Saturday games with the tougher kids from Lincoln and Franklin schools. Even landing in the same homeroom in color league teams at LaCumber Junior High. As time moved on, we all had lots of separate friends and experiences. But sports and early childhood times formed a strong, lasting bond. After high school, my very first few games of beach volleyball were played with Henry as a partner at East Beach on one of the then 2 courts. He was great, and I was awful. But he was patient, and he was encouraging. We pressed on playing ball together, just friends playing games like we did at Garfield School. Then we would take a run along the beach, on the water, down by the water towards the Biltmore. I'd watch Henry skimboard with joy on his chest. Yes, his chest, no board. As the years went on, like everyone else, I would only periodically see him on State Street or Mission Streets. But I knew to keep our encounters brief. He would smile, though, when I mentioned something about our days at Garfield. I could have, or should have checked in on him more when he dropped out of sight, but that didn't happen. I'll always feel badly about that, but it wasn't our destiny. The many years of memories have passed quickly, and I sadly realize that part of my life from childhood and youth had ended suddenly with this passing. I'm determined, however, to remember always the good times of our younger days at Garfield, his victory in the dark at Manhattan Beach, and most of all, the incredibly gifted athlete running towards the Biltmore, having fun, skimboarding on his chest. Rest in peace, old friend.
It is great to see all the legends here, but I have a few things that came in on the internet. How many of you know our past state senator, Gary Hart. There you go. Anyway, Gary played basketball with Henry at Santa Barbara High School. And this is what he wrote, very brief. Henry and I played together at Santa Barbara High basketball team in 1960. He had an incredible vertical jump on the basketball court. As in life, he was such an unassuming and gentle soul that he never seemed to me to adapt to the demands others made of him. He marched to a drummer all his own. Henry always seemed to be in his own world. I always wondered what that world was like, but it was off limits to most of us. This is a young kid who was a triple gold medalist. My baptism in beach volleyball would not have been complete without learning about the greats who came before and blazed an original path. Sitting highest for me in that pantheon of legends, the four aces of the deck have always been Ron Von Hagen, Ron Lang, Larry Rundle, and Henry Bergman. My clearest memory of Henry's at East Beach. Most players would stop playing when at East Beach in the afternoon when the wind grew harsh, as it does regularly, but not Henry. He would be the only player with one lonely ball who wanted to keep going. I remember him throwing the ball up to himself, then approaching, crushing it over the net, as the fans loved to see him during tournaments. He would run after it and do it again and again, working his way up and down East Beach, the last court to the first court, net by net. My glimpses of his training taught me a lesson in the power of preparation and the power of acclimating to and even learning to enjoy the most difficult playing conditions. Why did he do this? Is there something positive to be found here? In a year when two beach greats have taken their own lives, Henry didn't do what he did for prize money. There wasn't any, not a cent in his time. It wasn't for TV fame, Olympic gold medals. Those weren't any of those either. I think he did it to master his craft, test his skills against the rest. Maybe, most importantly, to see how good a Henry Bergman he could make himself into. That might be the best lesson for any athlete, on and off the court. For many of us, not to try to be better than so-and-so, but just to be the best you can be. Thanks for the memories, Henry.
Kind of friends, okay? He came in the gym. So one day he says, okay, what do I do now? I want to get better. I want to play some beach. Where do I go? What do I do? I said, you go down to East Beach. I said, they'll have a sign-up sheet. Go down and sign your name. And if nobody will play with you, just go pick someone. Get beat 15-0. Go down and just play. Do what you can. Just go down and play. I don't know what happened, but I lost track of him. I remember I didn't start running volleyball tournaments until '69. So I used to go to tournaments and watch this kid play. I mean, I was used to sit there and go, every time I watch, I go to everybody, I know that guy. I know that guy. I don't know where I know him from, but I know that guy. Remember the tournament he won in the dart? I was there. I went up to the bars, like everybody else does. What do we do? Go get a margarita, go get a beer. We're all drinking up there. I left my beach towel or beach chair down the beach. I went down to get it. There's Ron and him walking up, Henry walking up the beach. And I walked past him like this, and I went, excuse me, I know you from someplace. And I've been looking at you for 5 years playing volleyball. I don't know where I know you from. I said, my name is Gene Hopko. And I wasn't running volleyball tournaments yet. I wish Ron was here, because he picked me up, put me on his shoulders, prayed me around the beach, and I never met Ron either. I never met Ron either. And he's sitting there on this guy. Yeah. He says, Ron, this is the other Rons. This is the guy that taught me how to play the game, or introduced me to the game. I didn't teach him anything. He introduced me to the game. So I really feel proud that I was able to be part of his life. You know, it was tremendous for me.
And they would be waiting for someone to show up to play. And it would either be Greg, Jimmy Mingus, later myself, and it was Shamalis. There was a group of guys, but we all came down because of two players, Von Hagen and Lang. And those were the legendary guys, and it was such an amazing feeling to play against the legends. I mean, we were living in, we all thought they were the guys we wanted to beat, but we never really thought we were going to beat them. And I remember when we'd go to volleyball tournaments, a lot of us, Jimmy, John, we didn't train nearly as hard as they did because we never really thought we were going to beat them. And it was very important. We lived a cultural lifestyle, and the party was a big part of the lifestyle. We'd show up at different cities along the California coast. We would expect to lose to either Von Hagen or Lang or Rundle, Clem, or there were basically four guys. It was Bergman, Rundle, Von Hagen, and Lang. Those were the guys. And every once in a while there was a different breakthrough team that would get in there. But week in, week out, you knew those were the teams that were going to win. And you were just there. Maybe you get a third, maybe you get a fourth, maybe you get a fifth. But you knew that those guys were going to be there. And that's what you, and we lived this amazing experience because the people that came for the weekend, the crowd of the weekend, they were our friends. Maybe they weren't players, but they went to every tournament. They showed up at every tournament. And we were friends, and there was when you were mentioning Yoshi and all these people from Sereno, there was a group, it was a lifestyle event, and it was just...
Jack Adrian.
Yeah, we all know, we're all here, and the reason I'm pointing this out is, you know, it seems like the only time our group ever is going to get together again is at these funerals. Bill Wardrop just passed away, a really great friend of mine, volleyball player. And, you know, probably these are the events where we're going to get together once and again. And I think it's important to remember the legends, Henry, Rundle, Lang, Von Hagen. I just want to attest that when we were kids coming up and we went on to have great success, it was just amazing to go down the beach, sit there, and just talk volleyball. When you were finished playing, you'd sit there and talk about it. And when those guys weren't around, you talk about how you were really probably a better athlete than they were, but you know, they just got more experience. But you never really believed that. And I remember specifically Ron Lang. I would wait 2 hours to play at Sereno Beach, and they would be winning, and you wait for you're a double-A player, and you're waiting to get on the court. And Lang's looking at you, I don't even know if you should be out here. And you think you're really good. Well, they score 1 point, they score 2 points, they score 3 points, and if you're only 3 minutes into the game, well, Ron Lang's rule of the court to eliminate any low-level players was 7 points. 7-0's a skunk, and you're out.
8-0.
8-0. Is that right, Ronnie? 8-0. Well, let me tell you, I think it was 7, but anyway.
I remember 7.
All I remember is for years, several years there, I waited and I never made it past 7. And finally I remember being 7-0 and Ron, he liked to spin the ball on his finger while he looked at you. And you were going, oh God, not this again. And Ron's spinning the ball going, next. And he serves his ace and you're out. And the famous words would be, next. Well, Ron, that tenacity and the way you were, I mean, it infuriated all of us, but it created the greatest generation of the deepest generation of beach volleyball players. Shamalis and Mingus and myself, Greg Lee, all those younger guys that came right after you. It was a testimonial to how pissed off you got us all the time. All we wanted to do was get that 1 point. In month in, month out, we would strive harder to get 2, 3, but we never got there. And Henry, I think, is the same mentality, you know, just work, be there all the time, kick butt on anybody, and then, you know, shake their hands afterwards. So I just want to recount the one last story. Rudy Sawara and I played Larry Rundle and Henry at his last tournament, Manhattan Beach tournament. And Rudy loved the block. And I was so excited to finally be playing against my idol that I was trying to tell Rudy, don't block, don't block. I just want to see him hit. Because I didn't think there was a chance in hell we were going to win. And I wanted to, and this is the only time I ever played him. And Rudy kept blocking. He was one of the best blockers in the country. He wanted to win the game. And I just wanted to see Henry hit that fabulous shot. And I think it was just the thrill of my lifetime to finally play against him. And sure enough, we lost. But I think that was one of his last matches.
Okay, Butch May.
Hi, I'm Butch May. Look, I want to say something. I'll end with a story on Henry just after this. My daughter is really the product of this room. She says that. She says everything that she's been around, whether it's the women that have played here or the men, she's really the product of that. She's very proud to take that in any one of the contests anywhere in the world. Anyway, I'll let her know with Henry. Henry and I were on the 69 team that went to Montevideo. And when Henry and I got in the room, Larry, were you bugging with Henry? Okay. No, it doesn't make any difference. But Henry and I had not been out of too many places. So when we got there, the first thing we did was we checked out our room, which was high ceilings. And we went into the bathroom, and we both said the same thing. What's a drinking fountain doing right next to the toilet? So we started lighting up these things. Look, they even have hot water in this drinking thing. And we were watching this thing go off the ceiling. Anyway, after about a week in Montevideo, we were all invited to go to the U.S. Embassy. And we lined up. And we had all those that were educated. Henry and I kept moving to the end of the line. And we had all the graduates were up front. And the ambassador was introducing the president to all of us, and through interpreters. So as they got up there, Wink Davenport graduated from Wesleyan, going right on down, Rudy from CCNY. As it came down to Henry and I, Henry says, I went to school, so over. He said, just what you say, this is Bergman, I went to school, so over. So now I was last. So I said, boy, this is really kind of a lot of stuffy people here, so I'm going to lighten everything up. I said, what do you do? I said, I work for MGM. I said, what do you do? I work in cinema. So that was interpreted. I said, what do you do in cinema? And this is the first time I ever saw Henry with a reaction. I said, I'm a stuntman in stag films. That was interpreted. I got escorted out of the U.S. Embassy. Anyway, I want to thank Henry for putting all of this together, because his memories will forever be burned in my index of good times. I was one of the few to stay at his house, and his parents didn't want to let me in. so I kind of understood what Henry might have told his parents about us, and especially the trip in South America. Anyway, the day that I found out that Henry had died, Steve told me about it, but Misty got a text message, and she told me that the same guy that I jumped out of the car, I was driving down State Beach and I saw Henry, and I jumped out of the car. I said, Misty, stay in the car, it's a friend of mine. And I walked across the street. Henry's walking with his head down. He goes, hi, Butch, you didn't have to get out of your car. So he saw me coming. But she didn't say Henry Bergman. Says your old volleyball friend died. It was Bernie Holtzman. So my only comment to Misty was, shit, I thought they'd have to take him out of town and shoot him. Anyway, that's enough out of me.
Hey, I'm Rudy Suara, and I had the distinct pleasure of playing the first time against Henry with Butch in the Santa Cruz Open in 1965. He was playing with Raffaello, and we didn't know who the new guy was, but we know Rich because we played on the Olympic Club team that year, and so we were not going to serve Rich. We made that same mistake that so many people made. We served Henry for a while, and after he cannoned the ball off us a bunch of times, we started serving Rich.
But hit really well.
Rich was a great player on the beach. Yeah, he was. I wanted to tell you one more story about Henry. Henry, a lot of people have heard about what a great volleyball player he was, but one of the things he was terrific at was he was a really nice person. And when I came to Santa Barbara in 1970, I'd known Henry. We played on the national team. We played in different, we played in 1968 on the West Side Jewish Community Center team. We had Dugan, and we had Raffaello, we had Keel, we had Ronnie Lang. We had all these great players, and that's why that team was so good. Remember, right? We just banged on each other like hour after hour. And the one guy who never got tired was Henry. Like it'd be between games, and he'd still be like ripping the ball. And the thing I remember about Henry, too, is when we played together with our Santa Barbara Volleyball Club, I wanted to tell you all that he had a lot to do with organizing that team. John Lee was on it, Raffaello, Bobby Garcia, Tom Madison. We had, Larry Milliken. We had some really good players, and Henry had a lot to do with getting that club team together in 1972. And what was really fun was when we play, there would be a loose ball sometimes in a rally. And this is a little bit before all the back row hitting was so great. And then Henry would go up and just bomb the ball. It could be 10, 12 feet back, 15 feet. And he would just go up and rip it, and he had that beautiful topspin. And he would just cannon it off people, just bomb it off people. The last story I want to tell you about Henry is one time when I was in Santa Barbara, and he helped me start a clinic with Paul Hodger. And we started a clinic, and we had a little, thing at Santa Barbara City College. And before, Henry had me come over every Sunday before we had our class, which started at like 10 o'clock, from 10 to 1, I think it was. We'd go over to his house. He said I had to check into his house, meet his mom, and have kuchen and cafe and kuchen, which was really nice for me because my mom was German. So we had the sweet cakes and the coffee. And that's how we started our day. And I'm always going to remember that about Henry because he was just the sweetest guy, and he did a great job at that clinic. He was a wonderful teacher, and he knew every part of volleyball. So, Henry, I hope you're having a great time where you are.
Henry was one of those guys that played indoors and outdoors, and now I don't know if John Stevenson lets his indoor girls in San Luis Obispo play on the beach. But remember when I remember with Tom Madison, we'd play down at the beach all day and then go indoors and play on the same day. Now it's, I've upset the delicate balance of my coordination. I can't play on the beach and then indoors as well. That was a complete blow. Even Rudy Suara, who was not great on the beach originally. He was a great indoor player, and then he became spectacular on the beach too. So the two games go together pretty well. Boomer could play both games. Cubby, which game could you play? Indoors, Cubby had it too. This is Mark Jacobs right here. He impersonated Bergman for a couple of years.
I just have a couple of things to say about Henry. I sort of came on in 1969, and so it was right at that time. And in 1972, we went to the Nationals. The Santa Barbara Volleyball Club went to the Nationals with Becker and Boomer, and Henry decided he wasn't going to go. This was in the first week in May, and Henry decided he was going to play on the beach. And so we had this uniform on this team, and I wasn't really on the team. I was like the guy who shagged the balls and stuff. And so I got to be Henry Bergman for...
It said Bergman on the back of the shirt.
My number was 3, and I was Bergman, and I checked in. I had badges. I had everything that you needed. And according to everything, I was Henry Bergman, and we got second place, and I was hitting straight down. Oh wait, that was the hangover I had, I think. And then the other story is down at East Beach, Henry was always, he was just a great, nice person. And we used to play diminishing bridge. I know that he used to play this cribbage, but we played diminishing bridge back in those days. And I didn't know how to play. I was just a rookie. And Henry said, all you have to do is bet one more than the guy before you. And so the person bids 3, and then I say 4, and then everybody passes, and then I pay Henry all my money. And so I learned how to play diminishing bridge the hard way, but he never said anything after that. It was pretty classic. Anyway, watching those games at the pier in Manhattan, and